June is one of my favorite months to fish, and I always have a blast fishing this time of year. I love fishing during the warmer months because of how active the fish are and how aggressive they will strike your lure, and you can catch them on many different presentations. Whenever it comes to selecting lures to use in June, it is important to remember how much has changed over the past month. Many places across the country are now in the post-spawn, except for up north where the spawn is taking place or about to take place. It was difficult to select 5 lures to talk about today, but these 5 lures will work in many different situations throughout the whole country. Let me know down below if you agree or disagree with my top 5 lures for the month of June in the comment section down below. Also, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. We are on the way to 5K by the end of the year, and currently at the time of recording this, we're sitting at about 2.3K, and it would mean the world to me if you guys would subscribe, especially if you enjoy it. It would help the channel out a lot. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed already. It really means the world to me. But anyways, guys, let's get into it. The first lure I want to talk about today is the spinnerbait. The spinnerbait is an effective lure to use, especially when there's cloudy and windy conditions. The spinnerbait also shines in stained or muddy water whenever you are using a Colorado blade, but works well in many different situations besides just in muddy water. This year I have been trying to throw a spinnerbait more so I can get more confidence in the lure, and I have caught some good fish throwing the spinnerbait this year. Personally, I throw a double willow more just because of the conditions I fish in most of the time. I have definitely got quite a bit more confidence in the spinnerbait, and it's quickly becoming one of my favorite lures to throw. Personally, I love throwing War Eagle spinnerbaits, and I mainly just use a shad imitation most of the time. Depending on what the bass are feeding on in your local body of water will determine what you should imitate when throwing a spinnerbait. The spinnerbait does well, especially around any type of cover, and comes through it with ease. I like to personally throw the spinnerbait around wood, deflecting it off of the wood as much as possible. I have caught some nice bass doing this, and the spinnerbait is a great lure to throw this time of the year. The second lure I want to talk about today is the shaky head. The shaky head is a productive lure to use this time of year, especially whenever the bite gets tough. The shaky head shines whenever you're fishing around different types of cover and can trigger some big bites. The shaky head is a weedless presentation, so you're able to fish it pretty much anywhere, and the shaky head just straight up catches fish. There's 2 main styles of shaky heads that people use. The first shaky head design is a ball head, which gives the bait a unique action by rocking back and forth when retrieved. The second shaky head design is a stand-up head, which gives the shaky head a completely different action compared to if you're using a ball head. The stand-up jig head is used around rocks mainly and does well here in western North Carolina, and it's definitely the main one I throw. Most people will use a finesse worm when choosing what plastic to use. However, it never hurts to experiment and see what works well in your area. Most people will throw a shaky head on a spinning rod with light line. Personally, I like to use 8-pound tests because I fish in clear water, but that comes down to personal preference. I wouldn't try going higher than 10 though. The shaky head truly shines this time of year and can produce some huge bites. Make sure you have this tied on when you go out this month. The third lure I'm going to talk about is the Texas rig. The Texas rig is a good choice this time of year because of how many different presentations you can do with this rig, depending on if you peg your weight, the weight you use, and the plastic you decide to use as a trailer. Personally, this time of year, I like to use a creature style soft plastic and ribbon tail worms. However, make sure you experiment with the Texas rig to figure out what to imitate and what works best for you. The Texas rig is an effective lure, especially when going to a new body of water. Many people love to use the Texas rig because of how well it comes through cover due to exposing the hook. Personally, I like to peg the weight on my Texas rig so it does not get hung up as much, but it totally depends on where you're fishing at and what type of structure you're fishing around. Many people will not peg their weight, so it truly comes down to personal preference. No matter what way you go about it, pegging the weight or not pegging the weight will change the action of your Texas rig, and some days the bass will want it pegged, or other days they will not want it pegged. It really depends on the day. However, a lot of people love to fish a weightless Texas rig, and this technique works well when the bass are pushed up shallow like they are in June. The Texas rig really shines when the bass are relating close to cover, and this is my favorite time to throw it. Also, using a weightless Texas rig can trigger more strikes in areas with higher pressure due to the more natural action of the Texas rig moving through the water compared to if you had a weight in front of it. The Texas rig can be fished pretty much everywhere, no matter if the bass are shallow or if the bass are in deeper water. The Texas rig will straight up catch them. You can change up the retrieve too and fish the Texas rig many different ways. However, my favorite way to work the Texas rig is by dragging it slowly across the bottom or through structure. You can get some nice sized bass doing this, and it's hands down one of the most versatile lures on this list with how many different ways you can rig it and fish the Texas rig. If you're not throwing a Texas rig this time of year, you are truly missing out on one of the most effective lures to use in the month of June. It was hard for me to just select 5 lures for this month, so I decided to add a bonus lure. The bonus lure for this month is the crankbait. This is a broad term, but I am generally referring to a square bill and deep diving crankbait depending on where you're fishing at in the country. The square bill crankbait is one of my favorite ways to target shallow bass. The square bill is such an effective lure to use, especially to get some huge bass to bite. When fishing a square bill, I will cast over where I think the bass will be at and burn the square bill back, trying to trigger a reaction strike. One of the best ways to trigger a reaction strike is by deflecting the square bill off a cover and the bass will slam it. I normally try to bounce the square bill off of rocks most of the time, but we'll throw it around timber too. If the square bill gets hung up, most of the time you can stop reeling and the square bill will float out of the snag, unless if you hook into a big tree like I normally do. The square bill can be fished in muddy water conditions and in clear water. Some of my favorite stained or muddy water colors to use are chartreuse or anything that really stands out to the bass. Whenever I am fishing in clear water, I like to imitate whatever the bass are feeding on, but normally a bluegill or a shad pattern. Whenever it comes to deep diving crankbaits, the concept is the same. You just have to figure out where the bass are sitting at on your local body of water. Depending on where you live at in the country and how deep the body of water you are fishing will determine where you should look. However, generally I like to target points, ledges, and rock piles when using a deep diving crankbait. If you can learn how to use a deep diving crankbait effectively, you will catch some massive bass. Throwing a crankbait this time of year is really addictive and you will not want to put it down the next time you're out on the water. The fourth lure I'm going to talk about today is topwater lures. I decided to keep this pretty broad just because of the different styles of topwater baits there are and how they excel in different conditions, and it really depends on where you're fishing at in the country. It also depends on if you're fishing around rocks, grass, or timber and where the bass are at that day. Many bass anglers love a good topwater bite and it's a fun way to target bass. Generally, bass will be more likely to hit topwater early in the morning and late in the evening at dusk. However, there are times when topwater will work all day and it's one of the best bites in my opinion. Generally, I like to throw topwater on days with more overcast, but remember, bass fishing is not an exact science and it will work other times as well. Let me know down below what style of topwater you like to use the most and to throw in June. The fifth lure I'm going to talk about today is the Wacky rig. The Wacky rig is one of my favorite finesse techniques this time of year due to the larger profile in the water and how long it stays in the strike zone. Whenever I am using a Wacky rig, I am trying to imitate a bluegill because during the summer, every month, bluegills will go up and spawn every full moon. This is a quick and easy meal and will catch some huge fish. I especially love using a Wacky rig when targeting largemouth, but also have success targeting spots and smallmouth with it. The Wacky rig is a versatile rig due to how much you can change the presentation of it by changing up what type of worm you are putting on it and what type of hook you use. Also, depending on what worm you decide to use can determine at what rate your Wacky rig will fall through the water column. For example, the Yum Digger is one of the slowest sinking worms that you can use, while the Gary Yamamoto Senko will sink more quickly. Depending on the mood of the bass for that day will determine what you should use. Sometimes they want a slower sinking worm, while other days they want a faster sinking worm. It is best to experiment and see what works well in your local body of water. It can be fished in many different scenarios and shines when targeting shallow bass. I caught a decent bass while I was down on Lake Guntersville throwing a Wacky rig when no one else at the boat ramp was able to catch anything for that day. Many people don't like to throw the Wacky rig because they think that they will not catch a big bass. I'm here to tell you that the Wacky rig can catch some giants. Whenever I was on Guntersville, I was catching all of my bass in less than a foot of water with the Wacky rig. Whenever I see shallow water, one of the first lures that pops in my head is the Wacky rig, especially whenever I need to skip it under something. I love to skip the Wacky rig under docks or under branches hanging off the bank. Normally I will trigger a reaction strike once I get up in there. It is one of my favorite lures to skip and is by far one of the easiest lures to skip. If you do not have a Wacky rig tied on this time of year, you are missing out on one of the best finesse baits to throw in June whenever the bass are shallow and the bite is tough. These are my top 5 lures to use in June, and these lures will help you catch more bass whenever you're fishing this month. It was hard to select 5 lures and a bonus lure for this month, but these lures will work in many different conditions across the country. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down below. Also, let me know if you agree or disagree with my top 5 June lures, or if I missed your favorite lure to use this time of year. I would appreciate the feedback. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button to help the video in the YouTube algorithm so more people can get recommended this video. If you are not subscribed, I would love to have you join the channel. If you want to see how effective a spinnerbait can be catching huge bass, make sure you check this video out right here.